We all know the importance of water for living things. But do we know why it is so important? To answer this question, we need to understand water and its structure. Water is a molecule composed of 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen atom. Its chemical formula is H2O. Oxygen is a group 6A element and a nonmetal. Hydrogen is an atom in group 1A, but contrary to the general rule, it is a nonmetal, not a metal. Water is formed when these 2 elements are connected by covalent bonding, the chemical bond between nonmetals. Covalent bonds are the strongest bonds among the ordinary bonds we know. Water is polar because hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms have unequal electronegativity, the power to attract electrons to each other. Oxygen, in the electron-sharing characteristic of covalent bonding, attracts the shared electrons to itself more strongly. This causes water to have a broken structure, not a linear molecule. Oxygen and hydrogen atoms do not come side by side like a linear line to form water. Rather, they are shaped like the letter V. This is because the oxygen atom attracts electrons more strongly. Water molecules look like this, just as a long string looks like the letter V when you try to lift it up by holding it in the middle, with the ends down. In addition, the presence of both hydrogen and oxygen atoms in the structure of water allows for another very important bond to form between the molecules, the hydrogen bond. The thing to remember is this: covalent bonds, ionic bonds and metallic bonds are bonds that form within molecules and between atoms. Bonds like hydrogen bonds, adhesive bonds, cohesive bonds are bonds that occur between molecules and not between atoms. In other words, this second group of bonds are the bonds that connect 2 molecules, not 2 atoms. Okay, so we understand what water is, but what does water have to do with the evolution of living things? Couldn't we have evolved to need other fluids? Or could we not have evolved without needing any fluids at all? First, the short answer is, we don't know for sure whether we could have evolved without any fluids. But we have guesses about why this might have been the case. Liquids are structures that can react very easily. And they can mix very easily. Take a sugar cube and an ice cube. When you touch them together, do they mix? Of course not, because they are solids. On the other hand, if you put sugar in water and wait a little bit, they will eventually mix. That's why life evolved in liquids. About 3.7 to 4.0 billion years ago, we think there was a phenomenon we call primordial soup. That's what allowed life to evolve. I won't go into this too much, I'll talk about it another day. But it is important to know this: life evolved in a liquid that we call primordial soup, and in this liquid there was everything necessary for life. Water has many important properties for living things. Compared to other molecules, it takes much more energy to melt ice. This is due to the numerous hydrogen bonds in the structure of water and the high energy required to break them. It is important to remember that to make ice into liquid water, all the hydrogen bonds between ice molecules must be broken. During freezing, which is the opposite reaction, a great deal of energy is released into the environment. The fact that ice does not melt easily makes possible the glaciers that accumulate at the poles and contribute to the climate of the entire Earth. If ice melted easily, today's climates would be very different and warmer. Water also has a very high heat capacity. Heat capacity is the amount of energy needed to heat 1 gram of any molecule by 1 degree Celsius. This ensures that on a planet made of water, temperature levels are very constant and regular. This explains why the Earth is not 300 degrees Celsius during the day and minus 200 degrees Celsius at night, as it is on Mars. If the heat capacity of water were much lower, again, all climates would be upside down. Maybe life would have adapted and evolved accordingly, but still, life as we know it would not have evolved. Another topic is cohesive forces, the force of attraction between similar molecules. This explains how water molecules attract each other. We have all seen water droplets falling on the windshield of a car on a rainy day and joining together to form larger drops of water. This is due to cohesive forces. Thanks to cohesive forces, water can be transmitted through thin tubes from the roots of plants to the very tips of their leaves. Also, thanks to the surface tension of water, some insects and tiny animals can walk on water. This is an important feature for life. Water is also a very good solvent. It is possible to dissolve many molecules in water and separate them into ions. This explains the ability of cells to have many properties such as active transport, passive transport, and signal transduction. Water is also the medium that makes the primordial beginnings and chemical evolution of life possible. The deadly radioactive rays of the sun, especially when there was no atmosphere, were blocked by the oceans and seas of the early Earth. Today, radioactive rays still practically cannot reach more than 200 meters below the sea surface. The fact that life began on the ocean floor suggests that there is a relationship between this protective nature of water and the beginning of life. So water is also a radiation shield. This is not all we know about the amazing nature of water and life. But it is enough to understand why water is so important for life. Every healthy person needs at least 1.5 liters of water a day, except in cases of excessive sweating and diarrhea. Why don't we take good care of water when it is so important? We pollute and waste water. Yes, 3 out of 4 of our world is covered with water. In this case, we should not be worried about water, right? No, not really. Only 2.5% of the world's water is fresh water. 70% of this is in glaciers, soil, atmosphere, groundwater, and is unusable. So we can only use a very small fraction of the water. Use water carefully. Remember that if we lose our water, we may never get it back. Hope to see you in the next video.